It is my view that India should speak to Pakistan in India's own interest. One or two RSS, BJP, shall we put it, Sangh Parivar leaders visiting the United States came back and said that India should engage in back channel discussions with with Pakistan. So one may presume that pressure was put on them by the United States. Partly because President Trump loves democratically elected leaders who tend to be autocratic in their behavior. He was speaking, to my mind, not to the United States of America, but to the Disunited States of America.
KP Fabian, sir, thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking with us. There's a lot of ground to cover in this episode, like we usually do. Let's start with the 4th of July. The United States of America completed 250 years of independence. There were big celebrations in America. You saw those visuals come out. But when you look back at those last 250 years, what is your assessment of American democracy and where it stands today?
Good. How are you? And good to be with you and through you with hundreds of thousands of our viewers. Now, the question you raised is very important. And I did watch President Trump give his speech. Well, it was a partisan speech. And in fact, he was speaking, to my mind, not to the United States of America, but to the Disunited States of America. And that disunity has been created mainly by him. Now, a couple of things. His claims. He claimed that USA is the crowning achievement in history. Is that so? Well, let us keep in mind that since 1945, since the end of the Second World War, the United States started or got engaged in 100 wars. 100 wars. Now, he exulted about the strength of the American military. Well, at a time when, from a military point of view, Trump had lost the war on Iran. And he had arranged for many veterans to be present so that he could praise them. Well, let's look at it critically. There were veterans from Korean War, which America drew. America did not win. There were veterans from the Vietnam War, which America lost. So, his rendering of history leaves much to be desired. Then there were other claims. He said that investment to the tune of $19.2 trillion was coming in. Well, fact checkers do not concur because he has confused between, vague promises made and actual pledges. Next, he made a lot of money by abusing his official position. You know what was happening during the Iran war. Depending on his statement, whether he says he is going to hit Iran harder or he says that peace is round the corner, naturally the oil prices will change. And it is believed, and the BBC reported, that there's a lot of insider trading in paper barrels. Well, Trump was impeached twice. In fact, the only president to be impeached twice. And it's a sad commentary on the United States democracy that such a person should be re-elected for a second term. Now, democracy implies, imperatively requires, a diligent and intelligent electorate. Well, that is not the case with the United States. But I should say that the speech was well written. There was much eloquence there. And another thing is that, what he did with FIFA, he intervened and he got a suspended player reinstated. And then what happened? I hear that America lost to Belgium 4-1, I believe. Well, that is what happens. And incidentally, the FIFA president, Gianni Infantino, Swiss passport but Italian origin. Well, his record leaves much to be desired. He had accepted free tickets from Qatar and Russia when they were contesting to host FIFA. So that is where we are. Um, in fact, Infantino even fabricated a FIFA Peace Prize and gave it to Trump because Trump was sulking that he did not get the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, to conclude, let us go back to Shakespeare as always. Mark Candid said in Julius Caesar, the evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. Now, in the case of Trump, historians will find it rather tough to list the good that he has done.
Let's from the United States, let's come to India, and I have a twofold question here. The Prime Minister has, of course, had a busy week on the international front after his visit to Seychelles. You had the Japanese Prime Minister come to India. Now, Prime Minister Modi is on a tour of Indonesia, Australia, and New Zealand. My part one of this question is a rather broad one. How would you look at these visits and these meetings from India's perspective? What has India achieved or gained, in your opinion? And the second part, I will come to that later, which is the more controversial one about his tours and about his awards. But first, let's start there. How would you see these visit by the Japanese Prime Minister and now Prime Minister Modi's tour to Indonesia?
Yes, I would say that Prime Minister Modi has succeeded in keeping in touch with his peers, with other world leaders, in a manner which is certainly admirable. At the same time, what seems to be happening is that ambassadors or diplomats, negotiate and agreements are finalized. But for those agreements to be signed, well, you have to wait for a prime ministerial visit. Now, I do not think that should be necessary. We have to be more, what shall I say, businesslike. In fact, the tendency now is to sign as many agreements as possible. In other words, it's a quantitative approach. Recently, when the Japanese Prime Minister visited, I believe more than about 120 agreements were signed. Well, let me put it this way. It is high time that the MEA sort of did some introspection. sign all the agreements signed with, say, Japan for the last 10 years and see the state of implementation. And at times, the same agreement has been sort of, what shall I say, slightly made up, and again signed. Now, all that should stop. We should be serious. But once again, I congratulate the Prime Minister for his ability to keep in touch with his peers on a personal basis.
Now let's come to the controversial part, and this is to do with the awards that Prime Minister Modi gets on almost every foreign tour of his. Now, the Guardian did a story earlier this week, and they've listed out how Prime Minister Modi has gotten several honors. One of them was a Philip Kotler Presidential Award that was given to the Prime Minister for his outstanding leadership, and there are several other awards that have just come to life just days before the Prime Minister visit. When he went to Israel earlier this year, he was given an honor there as well. I believe this morning Indonesia has also awarded Prime Minister Modi, and it's almost become like a template. What do you make of this awards that are given to the Prime Minister one after the other? And would you agree with the opposition's allegation that this is some kind of a deal where a country promises the Prime Minister certain awards, and there he rushes and makes a diplomatic visit there? How would you make sense of this awards that the Prime Minister is bagging one after the other?
Thank you. Now, I wouldn't agree with the opposition that country A tells the PMO, the award is there, do come, and the Prime Minister rushes. But at the same time, I would say that what seems to be happening is that an impression has gone round across the world that the Prime Minister expects to get an award when he visits. So, as you mentioned, the Guardian article, in fact, that was written by Hannah Ellis Peterson, based in Delhi. Now, I suppose the Guardian would have done the research. And you also mentioned about the award given by the Knesset, that is the Israeli parliament. In fact, they sort of created an award. And we all know about the controversy about the Seychelles Award, how the very spellings were wrong, both of Seychelles and of the Republic. So, which means that all this is done in a hurry. So, as I said earlier, that impression has gone round that Prime Minister expects awards. Whether the Prime Minister himself is responsible for that impression, well, we still do not know. But foreign countries acting on that basis. In fact, were I editing the Guinness Book of Records, I would have mentioned that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is the most awarded head of government in the contemporary world.
But do these awards carry any weight? I mean, the Prime Minister surely is rewarded. He's rewarded rather. He's given these honors, and there's a lot of PR and optics that is on social media. But in real terms, how does it matter to India and perhaps a common citizen that the Prime Minister is being awarded on foreign soil?
Well, let me put it this way. We are living in an age where optics matters much more than it should. Headlines matter much more than they should. So, from that point of view, from the point of view of optics, such awards do matter. But do they sort of substantially contribute to better relations between the two countries? I personally doubt it. For that, as I said earlier, it is important to go back in time and list all the agreements signed and look at the stage of implementation. And where there is lack of speed, whatever is necessary should be done. And I repeat, a quantitative approach is not the best approach. We should have a more nuanced qualitative approach.
So, from the awards, let's move on to the trade deals that are talked about, but you see some of them not really materializing till now. One of them is the India US trade deal. Every 4 5 days, you have the commerce minister saying that, or India's commerce minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, saying that, we're almost there, the trade deal is almost about to happen, and you constantly hear that chatter, but the trade deal hasn't materialized after so many months of negotiations. What is stopping, what is creating that obstacle in the India US trade deal, according to you, sir?
First of all, it is not only India's commerce minister who has been saying that the trade deal is round the corner. The American ambassador, Ambassador Gore, he also has been saying. So these two gentlemen, whenever they say something, well, we have to take their words, their pronouncements with a pinch of salt. Now, why is it being delayed? Well, I should say that, there is nothing much that comes out about the negotiations that are going on. The media carry what the quote, the sources, unquote, tell them. In fact, investigative journalism is not flourishing in India. But my reckoning is that while India is anxious for an early deal, in fact, it's an interim deal. That also we have to understand. But the United States is trying to drive a hard bargain, whether in terms of agricultural goods or whether in terms of reduction of tariffs by India for industrial goods from the United States, and maybe that United States wants India to pledge that Indian companies will invest X billion dollars in the United States before a particular year. So all these pressures in the United States are there, and we may take it that India has not yet succumbed, and that is why the delay is. It is my hope, my fervent hope, that Indian diplomacy will be able to stand up to the United States and get a deal which is fair, with, of course, give and take, because any deal involves give and take. But let us see. I do not wish to prejudge.
One question, though, that I think everybody has been asking vis-a-vis the trade deal: will India concede on agriculture? Because that remains to be one of the sticking points as far as the deal is concerned. So, do you see India making any sort of concession, given the ramifications that it could have at home?
Well, my view is that India should not concede, though if India can concede in a symbolic manner, just to sort of, meet the American demand, not halfway, but quarter way. Well, that's not bad in diplomacy. But essentially, India should not concede because it is not in India's interest. And another thing is that whether it is Trump or another administration, once it is conceded, it is very difficult to take it back. You see? So India should stand firm and, sort of stand up for its rights.
Right. Let's move on from India, US, let's move on to our immediate neighbor, Pakistan. There's been a lot of buzz around reports of track two talks. You have, of course, been a big advocate, and you've mentioned this in your episodes as well, that there should be front channel, back channel talks on all fronts with Pakistan. But one question that has come out ever since these reports came in of track to diplomacy is, where is the pressure? Who is putting pressure on India to have talks with Pakistan? And on the other hand, there have been those top politicians, top experts from the country who have advocated who are not in favor of India-Pakistan talks. They say that, India has tried for decades as far as peace with Pakistan is concerned, but all that it has gotten in return is terror attacks and loss of civilian lives and armament. So where is the pressure coming on? Who is putting the pressure on India, in your view, to hold these talks? And if you can explain to our viewers, why should India talk to Pakistan or hold dialogue with Pakistan at this point?
It is not my view that India should talk to Pakistan because of any pressure from anyone outside India. It is my view that India should speak to Pakistan in India's own interest. But I'll come to that. Your question is, who is putting pressure on India? Well, going by what is in the public domain, one or two RSS, BJP, shall we put it, Sangh Parivar leaders visiting the United States came back and said that India should engage in back-channel discussions with Pakistan. So one may presume that pressure was put on them by the United States. We all know that President Trump would love to resolve the Kashmir dispute so that he can embellish his credentials for a Nobel Peace Prize. So that is one side of the story. But as I said, it's not a question of India talking to Pakistan because India is pressured by anyone. India should talk to Pakistan because it is in India's interest. And let me explain. India and Pakistan are neighbors. Nothing can change that geography. And of course, some people argue that we have talked to Pakistan in the past and all that we got was terrorism. Correct. That means, in my view, we did not talk properly because just because we failed by talking once, does it mean that we shall never talk? Let's look at life. Suppose we try to get a job or write an examination and we fail. Do we then stop writing? So, and another thing is that between sovereign countries, talking is much better than shooting. You take the Sindhu. In India, of course, we are of the view that it was a mighty military victory. Maybe it was. But Pakistan turned it into a diplomatic victory for itself. Why? Because India is telling the rest of the world that Pakistan is the epicenter of terrorism. Well, nobody was convinced. In fact, Pakistan has emerged as a very important mediator in the Iran-Israel-America war. And Pakistan is having excellent relations with America, with China, with the GCC countries, especially Saudi Arabia, with which it has got a mutual defense treaty, and with Turkey. And again, when the Sindoor war was on, did any country come to India's support? Yes, one country did, Israel. Did anyone else? No. In other words, while Pakistan got military and diplomatic support from China, diplomatic and perhaps military support also from Turkey, and diplomatic support from Azerbaijan, compare that with what India got. So Pakistan diplomacy has been smarter. Let's recognize that and take action. You see? Now, it has been said, that whenever Pakistan commits an act of terrorism against India, India will retaliate. Yes, that is necessary. I can understand that. But just by retaliating, has it worked? No. Sindoor happened after a retaliation, isn't it? So, retaliation may be necessary, but it's not sufficient. And what prevents India from talking to Pakistan? In fact, the RSS spokesperson, including Bhagavat, was saying that let us have back channel talks. Well, Bhagavat, I believe, also said something about people to people talks. Why can't we take the initiative and have front channel talks? After all, India is a major power in the subcontinent. India can restore diplomatic relations at the level of High Commissioner and engage in talks with Pakistan. While talking, India can take the firm stand and tell Pakistan, listen, if you commit or permit anyone on your soil another terrorist attack against India, consequences will be serious. They can tell that. And another thing is that India should also have an ability to communicate with the military, which is, even when Pakistan is under civilian rule, it is a Pakistan military that controls relations with India, China, and the United States. Now, in India, there is much criticism of President Trump for having invited the Field Marshal of Pakistan to the White House for a lunch. Yes, I agree it was unusual, but Trump was sort of, talking to the man who has influence or power. Diplomacy is talking to the persons who hold office and have the power. And that is what Trump did. So India has to find a way. And one more point. Has India taken the trouble to create and develop a constituency in Pakistan that wants good relations with India? Why is it that India has been very stingy in giving visa to the Pakistanis who want to come and see India? Let them come. Let them see the great progress India has made in comparison with Pakistan. Let them go back and tell their people. Now that will start the formation of a constituency eager to have good relations with India. Again, the business lobby in Pakistan. Isn't it cheaper to get goods from India through the Wagah border rather than through Dubai? So that is why I said India should take imaginative, proactive action, not just go on repeating terror and talk don't go together, blood and water cannot flow together. Now, again, regarding the Indus Water Treaty, let me tell you, this was considered keeping it in abeyance when Prime Minister Vajpayee was in office. But it was decided that is not the right way of doing things. So I don't think we have done the right thing by keeping it in abeyance, though I should say that as far as Pakistan is concerned, it should give India the assurance that it will never ever permit anyone on its soil to carry out an terrorist attack against India. So Pakistan also can take the initiative. But India has a higher responsibility, being the bigger power. And between Pakistan and India, well, India is about 145 million, and Pakistan, between them, it's almost, almost 1/5 of the human race. And SARC also should be revived. What's the point in saying that, oh, we don't need SARC? We need SARC. Geography cannot be, I repeat, cannot be changed. And that implies also having good relations with Bangladesh and with Nepal. And don't forget America and China and Pakistan are very active.
Okay, so I'll quickly go through the last two questions before you wind up the show. Last week, of course, you spoke at length about the MEA's remark on passports and citizenship. The MEA said that this is not a passport, is not a proof of citizenship. Earlier this week, we had a ranking that has come out, the Global Passport Index 2026. India is ranked 125th, which is, it has slipped one spot from last year. So now, would you agree that we not only have a travel document, but a travel document that is much weaker on the global stage? Would you agree with that? And how does a how does a weak passport, why is it concerning for an Indian citizen?
Let me make it very clear. Passports are issued under the 1967 Passport Act. And the Act says in so many words in plain English, passports are issued to Indian citizens to, facilitate their going abroad. Now, it has been argued by the MEA that passports can also be issued to non-citizens. Ergo, therefore, just because somebody has a passport, it doesn't follow that person is an Indian citizen. Now, it is for the opposition, it is for the media to ask the MEA to how many non-citizens have you issued these passports? Give us a list. It will be funny. I doubt. Though I had issued, or rather asked our embassy in Kuwait to issue a limited duration passport to an American citizen who was camping in the Indian embassy in Kuwait. I'm talking about the evacuation 1990-91, because he was an Indian and he told me that he was scared to get out of the embassy, because with an American passport they might kill him. So I consulted the foreign minister, Gujral, who was also there, and we decided that let him have a Indian passport. I think we gave an Indian passport with a validity of 7 days. And of course, we carried him on that famous Gujarat flight. And I told him that, you should hand over this passport to MEA the same day you reach India or the next day and let me know. And he did it. So we do that in exceptional circumstances. So now let us find out from MEA how many passports have been issued in exceptional circumstances. Because just because passports have been issued in exceptional circumstances to non-citizens, it doesn't follow that passports that were issued to the Indian citizens are not a valid document proving their Indian citizenship. And one more point. We all know of Dalai Lama. How does he travel? He travels on the basis of a Indian identity paper issued by India. And he gets visa on that, His Holiness. Okay? So that is a travel document, So we all know about it. Passport is a travel document, but it doesn't follow that it's only a travel document. You see, passport issued to an Indian citizen is proof that he is an Indian citizen. Now, why is all this exercise going on? It seems the government of the day wants to empower the Election Commission of India to decide who can vote, who cannot vote. Now, let me make it very clear. In a democracy, the right to vote should be a constitutional right, though in our constitution it is not said. It is a statutory right, not constitutional. Though incidentally, the right not to vote is a constitutional right. So I think the constitution also needs to be amended. Instead of having this one nation, one vote and all that, schemes which will not work, schemes which are calculated to confuse people. let us do something more reasonable. Let us amend the constitution to say that the right to vote is a constitutional right. And I say this for more than one reason. In the case of West Bengal, some people who were under the SIR, they got their right to vote after the election. Imagine that. And one more thing. Just as I have a right to vote, I also have a right to contest an election. Now, if you confirm my right to vote after the vote is over, that means you have deprived me not only of my right to vote, but also of my right to contest. Now, this is not democracy.
And my final question is, of course, about the NATO summit that will start today and tomorrow. President Donald Trump is on his way to Turkey, where the summit will be held. He, in fact, said that his decision to attend the NATO summit was largely driven by Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and because of his relationship that he has with Erdogan. What are you expecting from this two-day summit in Turkey, and how relevant is the NATO in today's times?
President Trump has personalized or over-personalized diplomacy. Look at the way he has treated the Italian Prime Minister. He said that she begged him for a photograph. And we know how she responded. Now he has again put out something, putting her photograph and saying that this is to be watched or something like that. Look at him. Now, it is true that President Erdogan of Turkey has a good personal rapport with President Trump, partly because President Trump loves democratically elected leaders who tend to be autocratic in their behavior. We all know that Erdogan has he is not permitting the previous mayor of Ankara, or is it Istanbul? I think Istanbul, to contest the election. And in many ways, Erdogan has diminished Turkey's credentials as a democracy. And President Trump loves that. You see? Now, it is so ridiculous that the Europeans are depending on President Erdogan to save the NATO. Now, let's look at the matter historically. The NATO was established in 1949 in the context of the Cold War. When did the Cold War collapse? Well, when Gorbachev came to power in the 1980s. And it was buried when the Soviet Union collapsed, 1990-91. So that was the time to dissolve NATO and to have a new European cooperative security structure. Now that was not done. Why? Because the military-industrial congressional complex, which makes money by making and selling weapons, they did not want that. Now, as far as President Trump is concerned, I don't think he wants to end NATO. He wants the Europeans to spend more on defense, meaning 5% and all that, which essentially means they're buying more from American companies, American military-industrial complex. That is what he wants. And I suppose he's succeeding very well. And also, he's succeeded in intimidating the Europeans. And they get intimidated so fast. So, I don't think I don't expect NATO to disappear. But Trump will say that, he will move troops and this and that. Europeans will say that we will spend more on defense, and they will also offer to pay more for America's keeping troops on Europe's soil.
Right. On that note, KB Fabian sir, thank you so much for speaking to us. We've covered a lot of ground, and I'm sure our audience will find some really insightful, fascinating insights from this conversation. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for asking the right question.